Check out carmarshal.com. The link is in the description. They help support us.
Exclusive, Air Force Colonel buys 24 billboards to expose cops who executed his son. After his son was executed by police, a veteran is now using the settlement he received from the city to call for a new investigation into his son's death. By Jack Burns, November 19, 2017. 13 years have passed since one man's son was fatally shot by police officers, and he cannot rest until his family sees the men who shot and killed his son brought to justice. Unsatisfied with the turnaround investigation which, predictably, exonerated all of the officers involved, Michael Bell Sr. has now leased 24 billboards in and around Kenosha, Wisconsin, calling for an investigation into his son's death to be reopened. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Bell, U.S. Air Force, RET, lost his son, also named Michael Bell, 13 years ago. After a night of drinking, Bell was reportedly the soberest of his friends and drove his friend's SUV home early on the morning of November 9, 2004. Kenosha police encountered Bell in front of his own home. When approached by officers, he got out of the car. He was told to get back in, and when he did not fully comply with officers' commands, an altercation began, escalating to the point at which one officer shot the young man in the head, killing him instantly. Advertisement. Bell was unarmed when he was shot and killed in front of his mother, sister, and 3 neighbors. I cannot even think of one time in my son's life where he even fired a BB gun, Bell Sr. said. At one point in the conflict, one officer believed the young man had taken his pistol and was going to kill him. After a third officer approached, he was ordered to shoot Bell, and he executed the young man with a carefully placed shot to his temple. They placed the gun so tightly to his head that the slide moved and rendered the gun unable to fire, so they removed the gun, and placed it a second time to his head and shot him. Following the young man's homicide, Bell Sr. used his influence and activism to change Wisconsin state law. Before Bell Sr. got involved, all law enforcement agencies were allowed to investigate officer-involved shootings themselves, essentially making it possible to easily clear their colleagues of any criminal wrongdoing, such as shooting an unarmed suspect in the head while he is being restrained by another officer. Following the retired lieutenant colonel's vigilance, a new state law was signed April 23, 2014, by Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. I am able to talk about his death because I received $1 million settlement with the city of Kenosha, and I used all of that money plus a lot of my own to get Wisconsin to change their laws. Now, when a suspect is killed in an officer-involved shooting, 2 independent investigators must be representatives from an outside agency, such as the State Bureau of Investigations, or another unrelated LE. The LE which is involved can be a part of the investigation but cannot be the lead investigator in the subsequent investigation. Understandably, Michael Bell Sr. now wants his son's case to be reopened and investigated by an outside agency. Read more, Paradigm Shift? After Ferguson shooting, nearly half of Americans polled, do not trust police. And I will tell you right now that's why I am doing this, Bell told PTP. He recounted case after case where police officers in Wisconsin were planting evidence at crime scenes and using positions of authority to steer investigations in the direction they wanted them to go. As a result, Bell has been taking out full-page advertisements in newspapers like USA Today and others to highlight the police corruption and cover UPS he found in the city of Kenosha. All of which are the reasons Bell leased the billboards. I actually hired a researcher and we looked at the history of law enforcement investigations in the state of Wisconsin. And since 1885, the year that Wisconsin formed their police and fire commissions, we could not find one unjustified ruling by 3 of those reviewing authorities, which are the police department itself, coroner's inquest, and police and fire commission. We were only able to find 3 shootings that were deemed unjustified by a district attorney. 1 officer committed suicide. The 2 other officers served prison time. Bell stated that in one of the 3 cases where an officer-involved shooting was deemed unjustified, It was only because a citizen brought forth information that revealed the officer was lying. As a result, Bell believes, it is not the job of citizens to investigate police crimes, but we have to. My son's investigation was complete within 36 hours, they exonerated themselves, so that's another indication of the problems that occurred here. The retired Air Force veteran believes other states should follow the lead of Wisconsin and make it a state law to require outside agencies to be a part of all officer-involved shooting investigation. He said his billboards were the reason why he was so successful in getting the state law passed. Here is a look at the billboards, which are currently displayed 24 hours a day in Kenosha. For more information or to get involved, go to michaelbell.info. Read more. Local police kill at least 400 people a year, mostly minorities. Officer Eric Strausbaugh committed suicide. He was the officer who claimed Bell had taken his gun. I think he made an honest mistake, Bell admitted. Officers Eric Wiedner and Albert Gonzalez are still on the force. Lieutenant Kruger has since retired. Kruger, Strausbaugh, and Gonzalez received the Meritorious Service Award in May 2005, which prompted Bell to take action, change the law, and now call for the reopening of what he perceives as his son's unjustifiable homicide. The problem I have is that the police department covered it up and tried to blame it on my son, Bell concluded.
In 2004, Michael Bell Jr. was shot and killed by the Kenosha police after a questionable traffic stop. Michael was hit and tased and struggled with 4 officers before he was shot in his own driveway, 10 feet from his mother and sister. Michael Bell died 3 hours later. He was just 21 years old. Michael was the third of 6 children in a close-knit family. He was the older brother that patched a skinned knee, the friend that used his paycheck to buy his best buddy a car, and the son who treasured special times with his parents. And, like many young men, Michael also had some missteps, including a struggle with alcohol during times of loneliness and stress. But he was leading a full, happy life, starting his own business, and eager for the future. Michael's death left the Bell family numb with grief and shock, but their nightmare was just beginning. A rushed investigation, riddled with glaring contradictions, would leave them feeling hollow and angry. And they struggled to comprehend how everything unfolded so tragically on that awful night. It was November 9th, 2004. Michael Bell was parked in front of his house. Officer Eric Strausbaugh ordered Michael to take a breath test, even though the officer's dash cam had revealed no erratic driving. When Michael refused, things quickly escalated. And after being kicked and tased, Michael tried to run up the family driveway. During the struggle, Officer Eric Wiedner kept Michael's mother and sister at bay. Lieutenant David Kruger was holding Michael from behind in a bear hug. Officer Strausbaugh began screaming that Michael had taken the officer's gun. This led a 4th officer, Albert Gonzalez, to run up to Michael with his gun drawn, and at the command of Lieutenant Kruger, to shoot Michael in the head. The Kenosha police report stated that Michael was shot because he posed a lethal threat to the 4 officers. But the evidence told a different story. No fingerprints or DNA from Michael Bell were found on the gun or holster. And according to 4 eyewitnesses, as shown in this recreation photo, Officer Gonzalez stood between Michael and Officer Strausbaugh, while Lieutenant Kruger held Michael from behind. This should have allowed Gonzalez to confirm that Michael did not have Strausbaugh's gun. But even though there was no forensic evidence that Michael Bell grabbed Strasbaugh's gun or holster, it appeared that someone or something had indeed come into violent contact with the weapon. So much so that the officer's holster had been yanked out of position from his hip to the front of his body, causing his terrified screams. But if Michael Bell didn't grab the gun, who or what did? 8 years later, a private investigation would reach a startling conclusion.
Brad, Tammy, this is an affidavit from a former Kenosha police detective. It includes his theory of what happened that night in November of 2004. He concludes a car part led to a fatal police shooting.
Michael was right here.
Michael Bell stands where his son died, in the driveway of the family's Kenosha home.
I kind of consider this kind of like a holy spot, you know. I mean, this is where your son lost his life, right here at this place.
But Bell isn't here to mourn. He's here to demonstrate what he and his private investigators believe happened in the moments leading to the death of Michael E. Bell.
I have no problem with the fact that the officer might have made a mistake. That is part of his line of duty.
Well, that alleged mistake revolves around the driver's side mirror. Fox 6 obtained an affidavit from retired Kenosha detective Russell Beckman. Beckman, who spent nearly 30 years with the Kenosha police, states any reasonably competent investigator committed to objectivity and the truth would have been able to determine Officer Strasbaugh's holstered handgun was caught and captured by the driver's side mirror. He states, the officers involved, and more than likely the supervising and investigating police officials, chose not to tell the truth.
The report noted that the mirror had been at the very center of the struggle, leaving it broken and hanging by a cable. It also noted that the KPD virtually ignored the mirror in its findings. In November of 2004, the prospect of a very human but fatal error loomed over the Kenosha Police Department. But rather than leave no stone unturned, its investigation was concluded in less than 3 days. The district attorney said that Michael was shot because the officers believed they were in imminent danger of death and lethal force was necessary. Not addressed was the lack of Michael Bell's fingerprints or DNA on the weapon. The mirror was not mentioned as a possible culprit. The bullet that killed Michael Bell was not analyzed, and multiple witnesses had not been contacted for follow-up interviews. But the officers were awarded citations for meritorious service. The case was closed, but searing questions remained. The Bell family sued the city of Kenosha for the wrongful death of Michael Bell, citing a rush to judgment and a cover-up. The family contended that because Officer Gonzalez stood between Michael and Officer Strasbaugh, the police should have been able to confirm that Michael did not have Strasbaugh's gun. But instead, Lieutenant Kruger ordered Gonzalez to shoot, and he did. The Bells further contended that the KPD knew it had made a tragic mistake and then initiated a cover-up. The Kenosha police presented an entirely different story, stating that Officer Gonzalez was standing in front of the car. From there, he couldn't confirm whether or not Michael Bell had control of Strasbaugh's weapon, but he clearly heard Strasbaugh's terrified screams. The KPD added that Gonzalez purposely angled his weapon toward the windshield to avoid shooting the other officers. The Bell family and their attorneys responded with the evidence. First, that 4 civilian eyewitnesses said Gonzalez stood to Michael's right and between Michael and Strasbaugh. Second, that the autopsy showed that Michael had been shot on the right side of his head with an exit wound on the back left. Third, the blood on the car was on the hood but not the windshield, consistent with Gonzalez firing from the right side of Michael, not the left. And fourth, that the shell casing ejected from the right side of Gonzalez's weapon was found in the grass and leaves on the right side of the car, also consistent with Gonzalez firing from Michael's right. The Kenosha officers were confronted with these discrepancies during their depositions.
Were you able to see the gun pressed against the head of Michael Bell?
Yes.
Would you please stand up in the position that you had Michael Bell at the time the shot was fired?
I was standing behind him and I had my arms around his upper shoulders.
All right. And again, Michael Bell was leaning in what posture at the time of the shot?
He was in front of me and he was more or less like this, leaning over.
And Officer, we'll strike that. What side of the head was Michael Bell shot in?
Left side.
All right. And you could see that because Officer Gonzalez was to your left?
Yes, sir.
And you saw Officer Gonzalez with his gun out pointed towards Michael Bell's head?
Yes.
And you saw the muzzle of the gun placed against Michael Bell's head?
Yes.
And is this the first time that you've given any testimony under oath concerning this case?
Yes.
And you understand the significance of giving testimony under oath in all matters, including this one?
Yes, sir.
All right. The autopsy finding, Roman numeral 1H, reads as follows. Trajectory of wound path through head, body in anatomic position, right to left, front to back, and slightly downwards. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir, you did.
All right. Is it still your testimony under oath that Officer Gonzalez was standing in front of the Nissan at the time he put a bullet into Michael Bell's head?
Yes, it is.
Is it still your testimony under oath that Officer Gonzalez's gun was pointing at the windshield at the time he put a bullet through Michael Bell's head?
Yes.
Is it still your testimony under oath that Officer Gonzalez had his gun pressed against the left side of Michael Bell's head when he shot him?
Yes.
And is it still your testimony that Officer Gonzalez was never on the right side of Michael Bell at the time he pulled the trigger?
That's correct.
Caught in a crucial contradiction, the KPD scrambled to reconcile its claim that Gonzalez stood on the left, while the forensic evidence showed that Michael Bell was shot on the right. 8 months later, in December of 2007, KPD presented its answer in the form of a reenactment video. Officers Widener, Kruger, Strausbaugh, and Gonzalez reenacted their actions for the cameras. According to the Kenosha Police Department, Michael Bell had now grabbed Officer Strausbaugh's gun while craning his neck to expose the right side of his head to Gonzalez's weapon. They claimed that this solved the riddle, placing Gonzalez on the left while shooting Michael on the right. But the video did not exonerate the officers. Instead, it had the opposite effect, illustrating a series of glaring contradictions and further suggesting a cover-up. The video depicts Officer Gonzalez firing his weapon point blank into Michael Bell, with Lieutenant Kruger standing directly in the line of fire. This contradicted the KPD's earlier statements that Gonzalez angled his weapon toward the windshield, precisely to avoid shooting the other officers. The medical examiner observed that according to the video, Kruger would have been shot by the bullet passing through Michael Bell's head, and he would have been sprayed with blood and brain tissue, neither of which occurred. The medical examiner further noted that according to the KPD video, the shell casing would have been thrown to the left of the car, but it was actually found on the right side of the car. With their defense in free fall, the Kenosha Police Department introduced a third version of the event and a second video to address just one of the discrepancies, the location of the shell casing. The KPD now claimed that Officer Gonzalez held his gun sideways, gangster style, when he shot Michael Bell. They asserted that this would account for the shell casing being thrown to the right side of the car. But even this 11th hour change in story was rejected by the medical examiner. The autopsy showed that Michael Bell had sustained an imprint or muzzle stamp from the gun firing against his right temple. The examiner noted that in order for the muzzle stamp on Michael's head to match the KPD's version of the event, that is, with Gonzalez firing from the front and holding his weapon sideways, Michael Bell would have to have been in an exceedingly distorted position, held from behind, with his head turned around 180 degrees and tilted upward. The medical examiner called this scenario forensically impossible. In 2010, the Bell family settled their civil lawsuit against the city of Kenosha for nearly $2 million. But their victory was hollow, because questions of what really happened remain open. Also open is the possibility of criminal charges against Kenosha officials, including perjury, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice.
If I can't get this done, then nobody's going to be able to get this done, because I have the education and the resources and the commitment to get this done. So I recognize that there's a problem here, and I think...
After the settlement, Michael Bell Sr. poured his energy and his finances into changing the laws.
A man on a mission, his son was killed during a police stop. Now one Kenosha father is trying to change Wisconsin law.
And Michael Bell is taking his message to the streets, literally.
The Billboards, it's a large gun.
Raising a weapon.
A smoking gun.
And raising a question.
And it says, when police kill, should they judge themselves?
For Michael Bell, the answer is no. 6 years ago, his son was shot and killed by a Kenosha police officer. This year, the city awarded the Bell family nearly $2 million to settle a civil suit, and now they're doing everything they can to change Wisconsin law, so outside agencies have to investigate officer-involved shootings.
We're not against law enforcement, but we're against a process that doesn't have checks and balances.
And Bell says he has received negative messages. Some, he says, are from police, but Bell says he won't stop talking about the issue until the law is changed.
4 years later, the law was changed. In 2014, Wisconsin Act 348 was signed into law by Governor Scott Walker. The law mandates external investigations for police-involved fatalities. If the law had been in place the night Michael Bell Jr. was killed, that investigation would not have been conducted by the Kenosha Police Department. And with that knowledge, maybe, just maybe, Lieutenant Kruger would not have given a lethal order, or Officer Gonzalez would have thought twice before fatally shooting Michael Bell. The Bell family says the Kenosha Police Department falsely claimed that Michael grabbed an officer's gun and that it ignored evidence to the contrary, and then engaged in a deliberate cover-up. The family says that cover-ups like these, combined with the facts of the Michael Bell case, oblige the state to reinvestigate the Michael Bell shooting, but this time with independent investigators. The family also says that a new investigation must include the release of all emails related to the case. Only then will we know the truth about what happened on that awful night in 2004. You can do your part to see that justice prevails. These officials have the authority to order a new investigation into the death of Michael Bell. Please contact one or more of them at the link below and ask them to reopen the investigation, for the simple reason that no one should be above the law or the truth. Thank you for watching.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County Cop Watch, and I wanted to explain what fair use is. You can use pieces of news articles if you're doing it for news reporting, you have commentary, and you're doing it for education purposes. So that's what fair use is, as you can see right here. Another reason why I wanted to make this video is to let you know I have just joined with Patreon. A nice thing with Patreon, I make no money on YouTube. They took the money away years ago, and so this is another way to give, and it's a nice thing too, because you can give monthly. You can give $1, $5, $10, whatever. I do 4 to 5 hours a day on trying to wake the sheeple up on how corrupt it is and different ways that you can fight the corruption. So Patreon is a way that you can do it, and then of course the old way is still there. Donate to Charlotte County Cop Watch with PayPal or credit card. So keep that in mind. 4 to 5 hours a day. I make no money, but the corruption happened to me and I'm sick of it, so I'm trying to wake people up. But my wife would love it if if we could get some help out there. There's 47,000 subscribers. Just think if each one of you subscribers just gave let's say actually yes, $1 a month. 47,000 subscribers gave $1 a month. That would be awesome. That's not going to happen. But anyways, that would be great if it did happen. But you know, do the math in your head. Just think about it. Like I said, 4 to 5 hours a day. I get no money from YouTube. YouTube has gone nuts. You can't do anything anymore. They're taking the money away everywhere. So these are a couple different ways that you can still help out with all this time that I put in. And as you know, I'm in a special situation where, you know, at least I can do it. You know, 4 to 5 hours a day. We have a cleaning company during the day. That's what allows me to do this, and we're debt free. So this is my hobby. I don't go fishing and all that other crap. I try to save the world. So help me out to make the wife happy, man. In fact, if you guys did give $1 a day, and there was 47,000 of you, and you did it, and each of you gave $1, and that was every month, oh my God, yes, I could quit. I could start suing them. Another idea too that we have is, you know, if I got, you know, some funds, we could actually contact everyone that has been ticketed and or arrested and put in jail and start sending them postcards to let them know we're here, and to see if everything went all right, and if it didn't, find out their story. So we could even do more investigations and more lawsuits. Lawsuits take money. So just think about that. You know, 47,000 of you so far right now. You know, $1 a day. I mean, $1 a month on Patreon, or $5 a month Patreon, 10, 20, whatever. Just do the math in your head. Help out. This is a lot of work every single day. Thanks.